Hi and welcome to this demo on the Nodegraph functionalities inside of Mari 3, as well as looking at some features that have been added as part of Mari Extension Pack 3.0. So in this tutorial in particular, I'm going to cover quite a wide range of different tools and techniques. So first I'm going to look at the core Mari Nodegraph a little bit, giving you some information and backgrounds and little, just going over things step by step a little bit to give you an intro. Then we'll proceed to look at some general extension pack enhancements for the node graph, and in the end we'll hopefully be able to build our own little node that we can reuse in other projects. And yeah, let's dive right in. The node graph inside of Mari 3 can be accessed via the Nodegraph palette and the Node Properties palette, and you can get to those either by right-clicking on the tools and just opening the Nodegraph and Node Properties palette, or going to the View palettes and Nodegraph and Node Properties palette. So now we have the Node Properties here, no node is selected, so it's empty, and the Nodegraph here. The Nodegraph, when you first open it, will tell you with this text that it's available in two modes, the basic and advanced mode, and let's look at the basic mode first. The basic mode inside of the Nodegraph is like a little black box that you can create inside of the layer stack, which has the advantage that you can still work layer-based, but you can utilize the node graph when you need it. So you add a graph layer by using this icon here, and now if we switch over to the node graph, we have this little black box where we can do different connections in a node graph way, but still have the result be evaluated as part of a layer stack, and we can add another layer on top of it, and we have this graph layer being some random connections that we made inside of a black box, and then we go back to a regular layer workflow after this. So solution. So let's take a look at some basic navigation inside of the node graph. Obviously, you can navigate as you would a nuke using Control and Shift and middle mouse button to pan. So it's pretty basic. You can also use the tab menu to create new nodes. So for example, if I create a color node, actually let me go to my top view. I'm now at the moment viewing the entire channel. So we have these icons up here. So the graph layer doesn't do anything, and I just have the baked version of a cloud node or procedural node here. So a paintable version. Now if I create this color node, I'm not seeing it here because you basically need to attach a viewer node just as you would a nuke to the node, and you can do that by selecting a node and pressing 1. And now I'm viewing this color node. Now you still might notice that it still says current channel up here, which is a bit confusing. So in order to go back to the regular layer view, in this case I would need to basically press once and press over just to reset this kind of view, because Mari internally will reattach the viewer itself based on this selection. So you see now the viewer node that I previously had attached is gone now. So what are these inputs and outputs? Basically, we have the data from the layers underneath here feeding into this graph layer, and then we're feeding the result back into the layer stack. So the output here is attached to the next layer that I would create here. So as a sample, let's create a levels node and attach this here and attach this to the output. And now if I double click, the node properties come up, and I can adjust this in here. Subsequently, we can do different connections. I could say, for example, I'm doing a world space, so object space linear gradient, which pressing 1 gives you this, and then let's quickly adjust it a little bit. And now, for example, if we create another levels, quite simple. And then create a merge node, which all the nodes, by the way, you can get right click, and then you have kind of the similar structure as you would have when you create them in the layer stack. So we have a node graph, we take our base here, over here, and we attach this to the mask here. Now if you view this, so we're getting our masked effect, so it's pretty standard as you would expect it to be. And then don't forget that we need to still put this up to the output. in order for it to go back into the node graph. Now some very basic node graph options. When you right click, you edit, copy, paste, duplicate, so expected. And then we have here the disable and bypass. Disable, or the hotkey D, if we take a look here, hotkey D and control D for bypass, we'll just do that. It'll disable this node, and you can now see what is being evaluated, which is the levels up here, and all the other connections are crossed out, indicating that only this connection is disabled. Let's activate it again. Now we'll use the bypass option, or control D. Control D. So this is again the same as we had before, but now if we press it again, we switch over to this levels 2. So now you can see this line is bold, while these lines are all crossed out, indicating that now only this is being evaluated. And the same thing if we press Control D again. Now we are on our object space gradient. And we can cycle over, and now all is active again. Now the next thing to do, or you can do, is you can export a node. So if we go to File, Export Nodes, you can save selected nodes somewhere else. You can import nodes. So if we try this again quickly, File, Export Nodes, I'm just gonna save this in here. And now if I go to File, Import Nodes, and re-import this, I'll have a duplicate of this. So you can use that to save out little chains to disk and use it in another project. We also have we can backdrop nodes, so we can control and then type backdrop, and you can change the color and everything. You can create paintable nodes. In this case, it actually should work. So if you go to, where is it? I think it's here, the miscellaneous paint, or you just press the hotkey P, you're gonna get this dialog where you can select the resolution, and now we have a paint node. Let's just quickly view it, and you can paint on it and bake down and sort before. Let's go back to our graph here. So this is kind of the graph layer approach. Let's take a look now at the main scene graph of Mari 3. So we're going to the preferences, going to the Nodegraph tab, and turning on the advanced view. And confirming it. Now we're going over to the Nodegraph. Now you will notice this root tab up here. So we have our graph group, and we have this root tab. Now the root tab will show you anything in your Mari scene, or that is on the current object. So let's create another channel. And you'll see Mari dynamically builds, just drop this over here, dynamically builds the node graph whenever you add a layer. So if we take a look at our original channel, the diffuse one, and actually if you're searching for a node, you can always press J, and then I'm just going to type in the node in this type, for example the diffuse, and I'm going to jump right to the channel node, which is now selected. So let's kind of dissect this small graph here. We have this diffuse, we have this graph node. When we select it, you can see that the graph layer becomes selected. Then we have something going into this node, which is called graph group. And we have the base layer, which again, as selected, it becomes selected in the layer stack. And a paintable node attached to this base node. And then this bottom transparency node. Now the first thing that is really important to understand inside of the Mari graph when working with the layer stack is that Mari needs a merge node in order to represent layers inside of the layer stack. So what you're seeing here is actually not the actual node type. So I'm just gonna create a merge node here and attach this. I'm just gonna hover over this, and you're gonna see the yellow line appear. And now if I drop this node, it's gonna auto insert. And now you can see here I have this merge node in here. And let's take a look at the node properties. The merge nodes hold the blend modes, the opacity, and all the advanced blend modes that you're used to from the layer stack. So for example, here we have the advanced blend modes, and all of this is saved inside of the merge node. So if I were to create a cloud node, for example, and use this over node and hook it up to the cloud node, and let's take a look at the merge node now. Now you're going to see inside of the layer stack the attributes that are part of the cloud node. So let's disable this. You see no attributes are in the layer stack. Attach this to the over. Now you see the attributes of the cloud node are in here, even though the merge node is selected. So this is basically how Mari layer stacks work. So you always need a merge node in order to represent it inside of the layer stack. So we have here our paintable node. Let me just quickly edit this so it doesn't show the green. So we have our node here, and we have the paint node attached to it. And obviously, because I'm painting here, because remember, inside of the graph group I have these two levels, which is why it's looking so weird. So I'm just going to disable this for a second. And now if I paint on here, you're going to see I'm getting a soft brush stroke again. Let me actually get rid of this as well. So let's take a look at this graph group node here, which is exactly what I've been working with before. So with Mari 3 we have the option to create what is called a Gizmo. And the Gizmo is just that, it's a graph group. So you can create your own Gizmo just by, for example, if I select all of these nodes, then go to tab menu and type group, it's going to collapse this down into a group node. And you can see if I double click on this group node, you're going to see I'm getting my original graph that I grouped, but I also have some new nodes attached to it, because Mari will basically map any open input with a connection here. So those are all these lines that are visible on the outside of the group node. So I could, attach another node here to a mask node, and it would get automatically fed into the correct position. You can obviously clean this up pretty easily. You can just select these mask nodes and then just delete them. And if I switch over back to the main graph, now I only have one input node, which is the one at the top. Subsequently, you can create inputs again just by tapping and creating an input. And for example, I want to expose this mask to the outside of the group. And I'm just going to rename this my mask. And now on the outside of the group, I have this handle my mask. I think there was actually another bug just now. Anyway. So that's basically these graph groups that we're seeing as part of the layer palette. So what can you do with these graph groups? You can actually export them. So if we go to this one, double click on the node, go to the node properties, I have now selected my graph group, and if I expand this node parameter here, you can see down here I have an export as Gizmo. And for example, if we save this inside our Mari Gizmos directory, so you can find that under your user directory, under my documents, Mari, and in there should be a Gizmos directory, or if it doesn't exist, just create it. And anything we save in here that has this MNG format will get created as a new node inside of Mari whenever you load Mari. So let's test this quickly out. So I've restarted Mari after saving the new node or the Gizmo inside of the Gizmos directory. Now if I right click, go to nodes, I'm gonna get this little node here, which holds exactly what I saved before. So you now have it as part of the menu structure. You can also save it into subfolders inside of the Gizmo directory, and then it'll appear inside a different subfolder and not in the top layer as I have it here. So this is kind of a way to save your own little node packages as a separate node that you can then use in other projects easily. So what else is in the main node graph? I think that kind of covers some of the basics of the usage cases. Like, it's still very, very early in its development, in my opinion. It'll need a lot of work, but that's the basic node graph functionality, I guess. Now let's take a look at what we can actually do with this stuff. Let's create a cloud node. So I'm just gonna stick to the node graph for now, just ignoring the layer stack. So this is kind of what you've been used to. You've been able to change the size and the offset of the cloud node and everything, but it doesn't really. With the node graph, there's actually a few more options that you have. So in this case here, we have this position handle, and the way a procedure works, it uses a certain coordinate system, either the UV space or the object position, or the normals, whatever. And by using the node graph, you can actually override this position now. So let's create, I'm just going to create a position node, which is what is used internally by Mari all the time when creating this cloud node. And if I attach this here, nothing will change because the position here is the same as being used internally. But let's actually create a color node. And I'm just going to create a mold node, which is part of the math nodes available here. So let's attach this here, and put this into the position. And now I'm multiplying the original position by a value. And in this case, the color acts as X, Y, Z. So we have red being X, green being Y, and blue being Z. So now if I change this, you will see I'm able to actually scale my procedure in X and Y and Z. So this is, for example, something that you couldn't do before with the just a regular node. Obviously, you could have used the Mari extension pack nodes which have, if we take a look at the legacy, where is it? Nodes, procedural. Oops, I don't have extension pack installed. 1 second. Right, back with the restarted Mari, and this time extension pack is enabled, which I had disabled just to show you clean Mari without it. Anyway, we have this, like I said, we had this position and color system where we were able to scale stuff. And for example, inside of Mari extension pack 3.0, I added a new node which is called Manifold. So if we go to Nodes, Manifold, Manifold 3D. So all of this stuff here we can actually do with this simple node. Let's move this out of the way, attach this here. And now inside of the Manifold 3D, you can do the same thing, just a lot easier. You can scale and rotate and translate. So kind of all the stuff that we would have to do with a regular connection, or like being creative with different nodes, in here it's all combined into a single node. Also, some of the extension pack nodes, such as the cloud node, which is a standard Mari node, I kind of reworked. So if we type legacy cloud, you're gonna get the same cloud node as in Mari. However, this one actually has some stuff exposed. If you double click, you see we have the transform scale in here and some other options as well. And one big thing is actually that these parameters are exposed. If we look at the regular Mari cloud node, you can see we only have this position. But here we have the main settings, size and roughness exposed as well. So what that allows us to do is, for example, we can create another cloud node, or even just a regular cloud node, and then just attach this to the roughness. And now we're basically changing the roughness with another node, which is not possible with the default Mari node. So that's an advantage of the extension pack 3 nodes. So I've reworked all procedurals pretty much to include to have exposed parameters. So if we go to procedural extension pack, there's for example, the FBM has a lot of options. All of these handles are exposed now, so you can really be creative with usages of procedurals and combine them. Let's take the cloud and drive the octaves with it. We can now use either this color 8B, or in this case, because I want to have a minimum maximum offset, I'm going to enter a set range node, which is another node from extension pack, and you can enter a max octaves here. So now we map my original black to white, so 0 to 1 range to 0 to 8, So I'm having maximum of 8 octaves, a minimum of 1 in this case. And then you can do different effects. There's many different possibilities. You could do a Brownian noise. I could chain this up a little bit. If I can actually clean up this a little bit. But I've noticed that the Mari Nodegraph is an utter mess, and I'm sure that they'll work on that in the next versions. I hope at least. But you can actually do quite a lot of fun stuff with it. So just kind of have to get used to the messiness a little bit. And if you press Control, that's actually something I didn't cover, you can enter a dot node easily in here, so you can kind of clean up your layout a little bit if you can. So like I said, you can make using some of the extension pack nodes, you can actually make a lot more complex procedurals out of just by combining different procedurals together and mapping them. Right, so these are some of the more extension pack side of things on the node graph. There's also a bunch of new nodes. I'm covering quite a lot of them in different tutorials, such as the manifolds and material regions and all this kind of stuff. Just a few ones that I haven't covered before. So, for example, we have the simple float node, which if we take a look, just double click on this, you'll see this here, and basically all this node is used for is to enter a specific value. And in order to make this as convenient as possible, there's a lot of different options to enter this one value. You can either type it in, you can use this kind of spin box, you can use a slider from 0 to 1, from 0 to 10, or from 0 to 100, or even 1000, and enter different values this way. The only thing you have to kind of remember is that all of these fields are actually added together. So, for example, now, I'm setting this to 1, so the result of my node is 1. Now I'm setting this to 1, now the result of my node is 2. And, if I do this to 10, now the result of my node is 12, etc. But where this is kind of handy, you can just add this to a handle. So we can change this here. I could, for example, add a cloud node and a merge node. Map this one float here, the other float here, and use the mask cloud, and then map the octaves with this. So now, if I just press 1 to view the merge node, I'm viewing, let me set this to 0, so see what's going on a little bit. So I have basically these two values masked together using the cloud, and subsequently I can easily change the octaves here, having exposed nodes instead of going into the cloud node. If it were attached straight here, I would go to the cloud node and I would have to go into the color B and change it down here. So this way I can have an exposed float value. The other new node that I think I haven't covered in other tutorials is a new adjustment node. So if you go to filter, this extension pack subfolder, and you can see now things are grouped by kind of type, and there's a new node called the histogram scan node, which is basically, in the essence, it's a contrast node. It's similar to the Mari contrast node. So if we just create a contrast node as a comparison, I'm just going to attach this to the Brownian noise and attach the input of the histogram scan to the Brownian noise as well. So open the contrast node, as you would expect a contrast node to be. Now let's take a look at the histogram node, histogram scan node. So that's basically just a slightly different version with a slightly different computation internally, but it's more in line with what Substance Designer, is doing in its node, which is called histogram scan as well. So it's just a kind of like having the same values in both applications. So the advantage of this node as well is that, again, the position and contrast sliders are exposed. So for example, right now I'm using the contrast slider. However, if I, as you can see, I like my cloud node. If I attach this cloud node to the contrast, now I'm actually overriding the slider, so changing the slider won't change anything anymore because it's mapped with the cloud node. So now you can actually drive this setting procedurally as well. So now that we learned the basics of the Mari node graph, and as well as some of the enhancements of Mari extension pack for the node graph, let's try and put some of this knowledge to use and create a little gizmo that we can reuse in other projects. I have my curvature baked for this object. And I've just been baking this out with the Modo Render preset for curvature. Well, it's not the best curvature map. You know, I'm sure I could bake better ones, but I actually kind of like this one because it has some nice gradients that I can use. So yeah, let's try and do something with this. First things first, let me create a histogram scan node. So we can kind of have a look at the range of the curvature. You can see we have a really good range that goes from very small, very sharp, to really wide on the flat parts. So that's going to be quite useful for some breakup. And for the breakup, I'm just gonna, as you can see, I get the width, the full width by changing the position. So in theory, I only need to map the position handle with something else to utilize this as breakup. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna add a cloud node as always, and let me just remap this with a set range and hook this up. At least try and keep some sort of system here that's kind of clean. I won't be able to keep it clean, I'm pretty sure. So we have some clamping, so it doesn't go over one, as you can see here, these little white dots. So let's turn on clamping and do some remapping from, say, 0 to 2 to 1. And let's change the size a little bit on this cloud node. So we already have some good different size stuff. Actually, we might be able to do some nice sort of drip effect. So I'm gonna scale the cloud just in one axis. So create a Manifold 3D node. Attach the position handle here. And let's just scale it in Y. And you can see we're getting some half decent sort of drippy effects going. Some scaling procedures in Y was a good one. Could probably get the same, you know, with it, just by utilizing a triplanar in here and remapping that one. Actually, we could try and make this a little bit more dynamic. So you can see I can map the scale here, and I have an X, Y, and Z. So again, this is the RGB color can be used for that one. So if I turn this to purling here and then just change the red, green, and blue. So for example, I would make the red and blue a little bit smaller here, and just change this here a little bit. Yeah, might work. It's not entirely straight where it's starting to interpolate between it. So that's not too good. some of this stuff. Yeah, that's not bad. Makes it a little bit more broken up. Let's see if we can actually make a few longer ones in here. Let's see. Turn this off. This kind of look. Set this in the scale. Get this kind of look. That's very kind of nice. Where did that jump to? Try and kind of keep this as straight as possible, so the interpolation isn't. You've seen this kind of weird, streaky effect where the two different values are kind of being interpolated, which is not very good. So I'm just gonna scale this up just to keep them all kind of scaled in one axis. This way, I still have the option to kind of mix the two different lengths together. Right. Always try to keep the Nodegraph clean and murray, but it's, you know, just at least make an effort. Well, it's gonna be hell in the end. Right. Actually, let me try, and I'm gonna create a transition node. I have a separate tutorial for this node, but basically it's used to upres a mask edge. So I'm going to connect the A here, and let's take a quick look at the mask here, and nothing much will change. It kind of uses, if B is not mapped, it's going to use a contrasted version of A to kind of combine itself. So we have these B over A by for example, pattern. So that means the B, or if B is unmapped, a contrasted version of A is going to be mapped over each other via the pattern handle. So let's attach something to the pattern. I'm just going to do, what am I going to do? Let's do a vector FBM, for example. And let's just scale this up. It has some good kind of organic patterns, which can be quite useful. And let's try and keep this as wide as possible. So I'm actually going to go over behind the intensity. Actually, it's not a difference. Smaller again, so we have this sort of grainy effect. Let's take a look at our transition now, and so it's attached right now to the curvature, and you know, now this edge is a little bit broken up already just by using a contrasted version of itself. So we can kind of add some details to the edges there. Let's experiment a little bit. Okay. Let's just see how we go. Actually try combining this, see what happens. Yeah, that's not too bad. I like this sort of added dirt effect it does. Let's play around a little bit with the contrast here. And this pattern is not really nice. So let's see what we can do with this. It's probably better to use a projected image for this. For example, the like a Traplana, like some Grunge map or anything. But let's for now just stick to a procedural approach. At least try to. Yeah, that's not bad. It has a nice breakup. I kind of like that one. Be safe, just for security. Let me try and see how I can adjust this. Yeah, it's not too bad. Got some nice little small detail, got some bigger detail. Let's see if we can get even bigger stuff in there. Probably not. I'm gonna duplicate this part of the chain and actually make a second histogram scan node. And just make a different sort of size variant of this. Let me try and make this probably a bit big. I just want some different sizes in there of features. All right. Let's move this over a little bit. Try and keep this clean. Combining this, let's look at simple merge node. Could be good here. Base and over, and then just multiply this together. We have kind of two different sizes, which is okay. Keep this clean again. And let's go and attach the B handle to the output. It's not going to be the nicest graph ever, but at least it's still sort of geometric instead of the Mario spaghettis. Actually, something lost quite a lot there. Let's disconnect this, and actually just use this as A, and then just use this kind of just add some really grainy fine stuff in there. I'm not sure if it's even needed, to be honest. Could try and play with the I think we've done it a little bit here. There's a bit of clipping where the maximum range is reached. Try and make this a little bit smaller. Yeah, for the sake of argument, let's say this is our little edge wear stuff. Maybe even make some harder edges, adding another threshold node, for example. You could get some harder edges out of it if you wanted to. So the first thing now, because I want to be able to control this some values from a central point, I'm just gonna add some control nodes in here. So the first thing, we have all these procedural nodes that we need to control. However, the two manifolds here have different settings, so I don't want to, I could map the scale with a control node in each one, but then I would have to set these relationships again. So instead I'm gonna just create a new manifold 3D node. And in this case, I'm just going to attach it to the 3D coordinates of the previous ones. So now basically we're feeding in a base manifold that can act as a control version for all scales of the other ones. So now, the manifold itself is already a control node, but it can be controlled by another control node, which is kind of handy in this case. Should we get rid of this threshold? I'm just gonna quickly add some nodes and I'll be back in a second. So I've made some cleanups in addition to this graph. Nothing too major, but let's quickly go over it. I kind of decided to use my own contrasted version on the transition node. So we have now A is mapped with this one and B is just mapped with my own contrasted version. Obviously I could have used the contrast B in the slider, but I just like having control. Plus I kind of want to be able to expose this once I make this into a node to the outside of the node. So I have the position of the histogram scan mapped with a float node, so I can easily control this. I also changed the previous vector FBM here, and I just made a multi-FBM, which is a nice complex procedural. It allows you to add some sort of grunge effect, and I added a levels here, which will help me as well to control. So let my mouse just go. It'll help me to control the general grunginess of this area. So I can, for example, add more grunge in here a little bit on the corners. So this is something that might be helpful as well to have exposed. I can modify it this way. What else? There's another exposed node here, which I might actually not use. I'm not sure. Actually made a more blurred version of the original curvature map. So just because there were some resolution lines in the original map, because I didn't bake out a high enough resolution map. So just upres the map a little bit and blurred it. So let's now that we kind of have our base going, let's try and turn this into a node that we can publish and use in other projects. First things first, I'm going to create a group node. I could select all these nodes and just tab and group, but Mari would make a massive group node with a lot of exposed nodes, and I would have to go into the group node and the mouse keeps crapping out on me. 1 second. So I would have to go into the group node and delete all the inputs, so I don't really like that. So I'm just gonna select all my nodes and just copy and paste them into the group node. Let me just quickly save this, because undoing a grouping operation in Nodegraph in this version is pretty dangerous. So in order to not have a crash, let's just save for security. So I'm gonna attach the output of the group to where I want the output to be, and then I'm gonna create a input node and attach it where the curvature map usually goes, and then just name this curvature map. And now I have my group node with the curvature map input, and let me name this group grips generator. And now I can get rid of all these nodes. Yep, here's the crash I was talking about. Back in a second. Alright. Luckily I saved. Like I said, the undoing of grouping is terrible. It does something to Mari. So let's delete this and quickly hook up the output again. Create the input node. And name this curvature map. Name the group grips generator. And now we can hook this up again to the curvature, and we have our basic grips generator. Now I want to expose some of the parameters from the inside of the group node to the outside, and I'm going to use this little icon here that's on the group node next to the X. That's going to give you the group node knobs dialog, which is a weird name, but basically it allows you to pick parameters from nodes inside of the group and expose them to the outside of the group. So first things first, I'm gonna let me go into the group just so I can see what I'm doing. First thing I want to expose is kind of the central size control here. So I'm gonna find this node, central size control world scale. And I'm just gonna rename this attribute, which it has appeared now here on the group node world scale. I'm just gonna name this grip scale. You can't have any spaces in the name for some reason, at least at the moment. So we have this exposed. Probably the mid of the curvature map I want to expose as well. So let's pick this curvature map transparency. This one. Let's name this grips transparency. And now on this group node we have the transparency as well as the size for now. What else do we expose? Probably need this kind of dried effect. So let's name this dried stains. And probably on this one dried stains size, and this one would be wish they would collapse all these settings by default. Grunge control mid, I think it was. Let's see. So this would be dried stains transparency. Okay. So now we have a little control over this node. So we have the overall transparency, we have the influence of the dried stains. We can kind of overdo this a little bit. Yeah, so we have some basic grunge control. So now we can save this node out. So for example, I can go to the node, export as Gizmo, or just right click, file, export nodes. It doesn't seem to be making much difference. And then save this into the user documents Mari Gizmos directory. And then whenever I restart Mari, or as soon as I restart Mari, I'll have it available to me because I saved it into the subfolder generators inside the Gizmos directory. Then it'll appear in my nodes generator. And I can, easily create any node. For example, I can create this edgeware node, which I've prepared before. I'll have some basic options here as well. You can make little helpful gizmos that you can reuse in other projects easily without having to redo everything. It's not quite the quality as Substance Painter or Substance Designer's automatic edgeware, because we don't have things like blurring non-destructively. So we're kind of limited to what we can do. But for example, on this node, because it's using the curvature map, you can actually still edit it. For example, I have previously edited one section here already, so you can paint out areas. You can kind of paint stuff in. On a mouse, it's a bit awkward. But you have some control over it. And as the base, it definitely serves its purpose. Yeah, so it pretty much covers it. Thanks for listening, and I hope this tutorial series was helpful. Thank you.